States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does everybody have a correct agenda now and package?
I hope so.
If not, share. Just like sharing bulletins at church. Run out. That's what we have. The meeting participation survey is something I bring up every time, this yellow sheet. Please fill that out so we have it for the record for the benefit of the public outreach. You have in front of you, hopefully you've read them. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes of March 13th TPC meeting? Move to approve. Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Do we have a first and a second? Any other discussion? Saying none? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody against? So moved. We'll move on to our public comment section of our agenda. We didn't have anybody signed in. Do we have anybody here who wants to speak? If not, we're going to move on. And we'll go directly to implementation planning. And the first discussion is on the public comment report for fiscal year 2018 to 2021. It's a unified planning work program. And that's on page 4.
Good morning, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On March 5th, 2018, NIRPC put out its draft 2019-2020 Unified Planning Work Program for public comment. That public comment period lasted for 30 days and closed on April 4th. No public comments were received. However, we did receive some technical comments from NDOT, Federal Highways, and Federal Transit Administration. They can largely be summarized as requests to provide greater detail on budget tables, request to provide for greater clarity on some tasks and activities and planning deliverables, request to correct minor typographic errors, and some requests to confirm funding eligibility for some activities. All the technical comments were reviewed and discussed with NDOT, FHWA, and FTA, and corrections and edits were made, but no substantive changes were made to the document overall.
Anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Yes, ma'am.
Quick question. When we were reviewing the signature page, it appears that all the transit operators have signed off on that. And I was wondering, how long would we sign off on that? And do we need to re-sign?
I want to say 16, I think that's I'm not positive, but.
So that's their planning agreement. That is not necessarily a sign off on the UPP. Yeah, so it's our cooperative planning agreement between ourselves, NDOT, all the transit operators within the region.
Any other questions?
Yep. Sorry. GPGC's work program calendar. What's the status on that?
I did include it. I greatly summarized your description to fit it on one page.
All right. Can we window the full version of that? Window the full. I got a call.
That's right.
Will the full version of that be added to the actual text?
It is now added.
Oh, is it?
Yep. Absolutely.
You make sure that he gets a copy of it either via email or in paper today.
If it's email, that'll be okay.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're here for an action today on Resolution 1808. That's on pages 5 to 10.
All right, that's me again. So yes, we are seeking a recommendation from the TPC to the Commission to approve the 2019 to 2020 Unified Planning Work Program. I have prepared a brief presentation about it. For those of you in the room that are not familiar with the UPWP, it is required by FHWA and FTA. It's a program of all transportation planning activities funded from FHWA and FTA. It includes additional planning activities funded by other federal transportation programs, such as the Surface Transportation Block Grant, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program, and FTA's 5307. Because we are a council of governments, it also includes activities in the realm of economic development and environment that are not funded with federal transportation dollars. Some highlights of UPWP: we've updated the format. Tasks are now linked to the 2040 plan chapters: environment, growth, conservation, human and economic resources. stewardship and governance, and transportation. The long-range multimodal planning tasks are now organized by topical committee, so if you participate in any of the topical committees of NIRPC, you'll be able to identify the activities within by the committee that you're most interested in. And then, of course, for the upcoming year, the 2050 plan is by far the largest task within PWP, taking a lot of effort of all staff. And the overall value of the planning activities in fiscal year 2019, including all funding sources, is a little over $2.5 million. On the right, you can just see how it breaks down. A little under $500,000 for administration and public participation. Data collection and analysis is the largest chunk at $530,000. Short-range planning, which is principally the TIP and environmental mitigation and red flag investigations, etc., at a little under $250,000. Long-range planning, which includes many of the activities that the topical committees are most interested in, land use planning, economic development stuff related to transportation, at about $466,000. That includes the development of the 2050 plan. Multimodal planning includes bicycle, pedestrian, and transit planning at about $366,000. Transit oversight is about $315,000, and lastly, air quality and education at a little over $100,000. And that's it. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Do we have any motions for recommending the action?
So moved. Second.
Any other comments? No other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we go on to programming, and we're going to be discussing action on resolution 1809.
Thank you very much. Everyone should have an updated copy of the agenda. So thank you very much to Mary for running those off at the last minute. I appreciate that. This amendment, some of you may remember that this time last year we had a whole slew of placeholder projects put in the tip until we finalize our project selection process. What this amendment is doing is it is updating those those projects which were submitted into the tip sometime in 2014 with new figures and updated needs from the transit operators for the next 2 years. There is a significant amount of projects here, but you can see that on the project list that the last few columns are all summarizing the changes per project line item. There was some confusion among the operators over the last week or so. I apologize for that. If you see a critical project that's missing here, it means that it's still included in the TIP. The only things on this project list are the changes to the TIP overall. There are some exceptions that are worth noting. So, for instance, NICD has several projects that were changed going out to 2021. And that's because those are those unique funding items that are important for moving forward the West Lake and double tracking projects, and that don't touch the same funding that the other operators use.
So you're saying this is a shortened version for the amendments as opposed to the whole TIP?
Right.
Just for clarity. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could you tell me the sponsor NT, who does that refer to? NT sponsor.
It's North Township Dial Ride.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Question, James. I had submitted the funding request for the new services over. That is not going to be included in this TIP amendment.
So we did receive from a couple of different operators some significant expansion projects. And what we need to do is, so those projects weren't necessarily compatible in a funding sense. So there may be some prioritization that has to happen, and we have to tweak those numbers a little bit. That's one reason why they weren't included with this amendment. Another reason is that they require a longer comment period. And then also, there may be some other funding options available that we have yet to explore. So I wanted to make sure that we really look at those more closely before putting them before this committee.
Will that be on the agenda for the next transit operators?
It's possible, yes. What we need to do first is, it may not need to go to the transit operators, it depends on the funding source, and that's something that we're going to work out first this week. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get some sort of timeline.
Sure.
Yeah, I suggest you just put it on as a placeholder, and that way you know you're going to address it.
Well, if I may be, I think those projects we should be able to address by the May commission meeting is our intention.
All right, and this is just a suppose.
Sure.
Suppose that these expansion projects get approved at the next transit operator roundtable. What's the process and how long is that going to take before the funds are available?
That depends on your implementation year, but if it's approved right away, it would be available right away for the whatever year you're proposing.
But it doesn't have to go out for comment?
It would be a 30-day comment period for the project.
So if it gets approved as a transit operator, does it have to go to the full board? Approval before it goes out for comment?
No, it can go out for comment before the board approves it. Typically, the comment period expires at the same time as board approval.
Okay. That helps. That clears it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, what do we want to do with resolution 1809? Do I have a motion? Second. Okay. Got a first or a second? That work? Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody against? Signify by saying nay. So moved.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to the topical committee reports, starting with Environmental Management Policy Committee. We have, oh, there you go.
We had a really great Environmental Management Policy Committee meeting on last Thursday. It was twice a year. We have a joint meeting with the Federal Urban Waters Partnership. So we had quite a few more federal agencies present than we often do. And we had a presentation from the DNR on the NIRPC program for wetland and stream bank mitigation. If any of you are following that, they've been working on negotiating this program with the Army Corps for like 3-4 years. And the funding for developing the program has come from NDOT and Federal Highway. So we had a great presentation. They're on their like third round of responding back. They anticipate possibly in May approval of the program. So what that program will do is if you have to do wetland or stream bank mitigation, and I think they have some other DNR permit mitigation too, but literally you'll just have a fee per acre. You pay the DNR, you sign a thing, DNR's got our money, they're doing it, and you're done with your mitigation. So at NIRPC, we're working with partners to make sure those mitigation dollars are spent in priority areas for our region. So that's the NPC report, and can I take an opportunity to do an advertisement? I also wanted to let people know that NIRPC is co-sponsoring with the Forum a Brownfield workshop on April 25th in the morning. We'll be here talking about some best practices and some lessons learned from our current Brownfield programs we've been working on. So looking forward to seeing a lot of folks here for that.
And thank you for your efforts on the other program, the Enlivement program. It's important as you're doing your constructions, you have some incidental wetlands and be able to mitigate some trade-offs that will make, there will be more expediency, I think, in this process.
I also think it will help with cost estimate, project cost estimation, having that known dollar amount to build into your cost projection.
Thank you. Next, panel.
All right, on last week, we had our meeting, and we had a very robust presentation concerning the 2050 plan. Trey's going to talk about that in detail momentarily. And just so you know, the May meeting will not happen. I will not be here for one, but we are going to be having our next meeting in June. However, we're going to be meeting feedback from many stakeholders. Again, Trey will unpack that momentarily, including the 3PC. And we'll be putting out emails, surveys, and what have you to kind of garner that information, so be on the lookout there. Two big initiatives that are happening right now. We're putting together the update to the Greenways and Blueways map, the bike, ped, and paddle map, very popular item in the region. And we're looking to have new maps out on the street within a month or so. And then the Greenways and Blueways 2020 plan, which was also approved last month. And we're going to be seeing that ready for print within a month or so as well. And as I said, no May meeting. The next meeting will be in June, and that is on the back of your agenda. Any questions?
The map that you sent me maybe a month or so ago, will that be supplanted by the new map or that?
Yes, but they're going to be very minor revisions. This is not a major overhaul.
Okay.
So we're adding some lines here, some lines there, but 95% of it remains intact.
And you have sponsorship for that?
Yeah, we're carrying the sponsorships from 2 years ago. We've actually added a couple more sponsors, which is great because we're going to announce something else because of that, but we're okay. Funding wise, yes.
We'll wait for the announcement, and David, all the maps are relatively relevant. The old maps are very usable and very informative for the fourth quarter and Lake counties. They're free maps, and those trails still exist.
Yeah, we haven't lost any.
Anymore. And there really aren't a lot of extra miles of trail, but it's good to see it's being maintained and kept up.
Well, because GPTC in Chicago, because our buses have bike racks, we were going to be including an overlay of the route network and the bike map in our transit map, and I wanted to make sure that overlay isn't going to become obsolete.
Shouldn't be obsolete. I mean, the map you've already put out. Your.
We're in the printing process right now.
Okay. We'll talk after the meeting.
Okay.
I think things are going to. We're doing some minor work in Hammond, a lot of major work in like St. John and Valparaiso, and I think it's outside of your surgical areas. Thank you.
And the map should be available online, so if you want to see it at any time. Transit operators, roundtable.
All right, the transit operators meeting for today is canceled, but I just attended a conference in Philadelphia, and it was announced at the conference that the federal apportionment should be underway for the 2018 year. So we should be moving into grant writing season pretty soon, and if anyone has any questions about that, you can always reach out to me. Transit operators will be discussing the 2050 plan update at our next meeting in May. But the operators already have a copy of that. If they have any questions about that, they'll reach out to me.
You'll have a full agenda at your next meeting.
Yep.
Any questions?
We have a comment. The Transit Triangle is in the middle of a 30-day public comment period, expanding hours, going to 9 loops for each of the 2 buses instead of 6 daily. There will be a public meeting Saturday morning in Michigan City, and another one next Thursday evening in Michigan City at City Hall.
What times?
The one on Saturday is at 10:30 in the morning. Excuse me, it's not at Michigan City Hall, it's at Michigan City Fire Station. The information is available on the transittriangle.com website. The one on next Thursday night is at 5:30 p.m.
Where's that at again?
I'm sorry, it's at the Michigan City fire department on Michigan Boulevard in Michigan City. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, let's proceed. Land Use Committee.
Just a quick update on the land use committee that met on March 21st. The substantial focus of the meeting was a presentation by the city planner from East Chicago about the Roxana transit-oriented development that's occurring in that neighborhood around East Chicago Navy Station. Lots of great things happening there. And then there was a 2050 plan presentation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll have surface transportation.
Surface Transportation Committee had an unofficial meeting last Thursday, April 5th. We did not have an official quorum present, but we did have a good, helpful discussion on some items about the 2050 plan, as has been mentioned by other topical committee reports. We also heard from some letting reports. Stephen Summers gave a lot of very good information about what to expect this construction season in the summer. We also talked about the recent INDOT local tracks matching program. It's a $125 million program being made available for matches to local units of government on rail grade separation projects especially. So any eligible local road could be eligible for this, and the application period will be this summer. There's more information about this on April 16th, which is coming up next, I believe that's next Monday, at the INDOT LaPorte District Office at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're interested in learning more about that program, I highly encourage you to attend that meeting. Also, our next meeting is scheduled to be on June 5th, but if we might have it May 1st if some Valparaiso University students would be able to present at that meeting. So I'm going to check with them, but stay tuned. Thanks.
I think I could be this big, but the tracks program is kind of being developed. And it's in a process of considering other things besides grade separation. I suggest that there's a good possibility we're going to consider safety, signalization, and some other alternatives to the expenditure. It's a limited amount of money, but at the same time, I'd like to see us use as much of the resources as we can. There's great opportunity for most of your communities since we have so many railways pass through us, being at the south end of the lake. That's a blessing and a curse. Any questions, comments? So we'll just move on to the next part of the report to the planning partners. Joyce? No choices there.
Is Susan Corona there, or Susan Weber there?
No, she's not. She is not.
She is not, okay. Just to let you know that we did issue the results of our certification review, and we will be reporting that out at the next full commission meeting. But we did have a collective action on the public involvement plan. And so that is one thing that we are asking for some activity to take place, and that's about it right now.
What kind of activity are you anticipating?
Sorry, I'm off guard here. Basically, one of the things that we had found is that we just feel that we have a very good public involvement plan, but there are certain aspects they're not really but they're not finding that they're following to the truest extent. Part of that would be some of the analysis on a yearly analysis of how effective the public involvement plan is going, is reaching out to people, and the other is, where the public involvement plan and the current UPWP call out for an outreach committee, some type of public outreach committee comprising some citizens and stuff, and that still has not been activated. And even under your present restructuring, that committee still hasn't been activated. So we're asking NIRPC to give us within 60 days, a plan of action and how they're going to be addressing, how they will be addressing the, what steps they will be taking in the next 60 days to remedy the public participation plan corrective action findings.
We'll see what we can do to improve that. It's going to be ensuing discussions with staff, I assume.
Yes, yes, and we've been talking to them.
And one of the staff is
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say we'll be addressing this, but also introduce, since the last time TPC has met, we have a new staff member on board, Dominique Edwards, from Michigan City. She's taken the role of the new public participation planner, and she's already digging into all of these issues.
I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't know she was hired, but
Yep. Thank you.
it sounds like everything's good. Thank you, Bruce. Anything else,
You're
Dan?
welcome. Sorry for this news.
Oh, that's not a problem. That's why we're here.
Okay.
Do we have anybody from the neighboring regional planning associations, Northeast Illinois, Southwest Michigan, Southeast Wisconsin? Seeing nobody, we will go ahead and proceed to the 2050 plan, development milestones, and 2010 retrospective.
Thank you. See you again. I apologize for those of you who have already seen this several times, but it's important stuff. So we are excited to be starting development of the NIRPC's next long-range plan for 2050. It's been about 8 years since the launch of the 2040 plan, which was an award-winning plan, and about 4 years since we've updated it. So federal law does require us to update a long-range plan every 4 years. And so this next update is going to be a little bit more significant than the prior one, and we're going to be moving the horizon year out to 2050. 2050 is important to me because that's my retirement year. So it'll be a good performance measure on my career if all the goals are met. So anyway, this presentation will provide you with highlights on our tasks, our timelines, as well as some of the work conducted so far. We're going to use the 2040 plan as a cornerstone to launch from. That's where we are right now. We're going to try to use a new qualitative scenario planning approach that allows us to look at different types of futures that we may experience here in northwestern Indiana. Older scenario planning techniques have often asked planners to try to choose a future they think will happen. And of course, if anyone was doing scenario planning in the early 90s, no one would have heard that the internet was coming and change our entire world. So planners tend to make these forecasts and then try to set the course in one direction, and then the rest of the history goes this way. So what we're going to try to do is identify as many trends as possible to see what kind of futures may happen in the future, and then kind of identify investments and strategies that will work in as many of them as possible. We're going to incorporate performance-based planning, which is a main feature of the FAST Act, and required in US DOT into the 2050 plan. As you remember from the last commission meeting and last TPC meeting, we have already adopted the safety target, for instance. We have more targets to come later throughout the year. We're going to identify those strategies and investments, like I said, that will work in most futures. We're also going to incorporate the creation of the next NOFA into the long-range planning process so that the two are completely aligned. And with that, we'll create clear and consistent evaluation methods for all the strategies and investments that will be identified in the 2050 plan. And lastly, we hope to have a 4-year action plan, at least 4-year action plan, as a result of the 2050 plan. So this is just a highlight of the timeline and milestones that we're going to be embarking on. The stuff in yellow is where we are right now. There are 16 steps. Wouldn't be government if there were a lot of steps. So steps A through E are largely preparing to get the major work underway. So that includes a retrospective on the 2040 plan, a look at all the different federal inputs into the plan, what's required of our long-range plan, what are the different federal priorities that are contained within the FAST Act and various planning emphasis areas, as well as just tried and true things that have always been part of the long-range planning process, Clean Air Act, fiscal constraint, etc. And we'll also be looking at state and regional priorities, state from IDEM, INDOT, et cetera, and then various regional priorities from the different partners that we have. We also did a fairly crude but interesting peer MPO exercise where we looked at different MPOs throughout the nation that have somewhat similar characteristics to us to see if there's anything we should be doing that they're doing. And then lastly, for preparation for public outreach. And then the stuff in blue is the stuff we still have yet to do. And the next step after this period we're in right now is to articulate a vision and need for the 2050 plan. We're going to start that with a public engagement process, which you can see in pink. Those are defined public outreach periods, but we will be working with each of the topical committees, the TPC and the commission throughout the entire process. So starting April 30th, we'll have our first public meeting, and we're going to launch a survey to go with it to try to get understanding for what folks in Northwestern Indiana think are most important for us to pursue in the 2050 plan, as well as telling us what they think is needed to achieve what, that vision. That public engagement period will run through May 18th. More details to come. We have one more meeting location to nail down before we can start advertising. And then after that, we'll start working on identifying the various influences and trends that may affect our future. And then in H, which will be later in the summer, we'll develop those future scenarios. In J, we'll run concurrently, which will be setting up the performance-based planning framework for the 2050 plan. And then in K, we'll be establishing the evaluation methods for the strategies and investments. And then L, another engagement period where we'll work with the public to identify strategies and investments to consider pursuing in the 2050 plan. And then M and N will look at evaluating the strategies and investments and seeking their endorsement from the commission. And then we will prepare our action plan and then go through some of the final steps of printing, publication, final comment periods, make sure we got everything right as the public wanted us to. And then the last step in R is the commission adoption, federal and state approval. So just a highlight of the project management. Well, one of the other committees we heard from was very concerned about whether or not they would have adequate input. And I just want to give you a snapshot of the project management tool we're using. It's a cascade process, but I can't show you the whole thing. It's far too large, but there are dots everywhere, all throughout it, with touch points at the various topical committees, the TPC and the commission. So we will be with you throughout the process as we go through this, as well as the public, of course. So, of course, we started with a review of the vision and goals of the 2040 plan to see where we needed to go from and go towards. And a recap of the vision were 4 broad statements that we would like to have: a vibrant region, a revitalized region, an accessible region, and a united region. We'll be testing these statements along with the goals associated with them in that first engagement process starting on April 30th. We also did review planning accomplishments centered throughout the 5 plan chapters of the 2040 plan: environment, growth and conservation, human and economic resources, stewardship and governance, and transportation, mainly through the lens of planning, policy, and various capital and operational investments. These accomplishments will be published shortly, but we principally wanted to make sure that before we went forward, we looked back to see what we completed throughout the region. Then we also used that to see what we've accomplished, to see what we haven't finished or even started yet. So I know this is a little tough to read, but we're going to post it on the website. So, but in each of the planned chapter areas, there's any number of things that we could still consider pursuing in the 2050 plan. Just for transportation, I'll just highlight expand short sea shipping on the Great Lakes, so that we're working with freight providers and Port of Indiana. Fully implementing the US 30 I-65 safety planning study, continue implementing the complete streets policy, and the regional corridor study, for example. And then lastly, the highlights of various staff memos that will be coming soon. We looked at the federal inputs in the 2050 plan, the regional inputs, and the state inputs, so you get to see what we're looking at and what will be influencing the plan, as well as that peer MPO exercise. And that's about it. anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them.
And this will be presented on the webpage, so you can keep track of the progress that's on this. And, you heard Joyce and the staff mention, we welcome comment anytime, all the time.
Absolutely. Can't do without it.
Any questions, comments for? Okay.
Thank you.
Point of the meeting that we have any other business that we need to attend to? Anybody at all? If not, staff announcements. Do we have any staff announcements ahead? Please. That's fine.
Just a reminder that this is National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week, and I know it may not seem like it, but spring and summer will come, and with it will come our orange barrels, and we have a lot of construction going on in the region this summer and spring once the weather starts cooperating. And so just be careful that we want our workers and our contractors' workers to go home every day in the same way that they came to us. So please be mindful and share with your constituents and communities that, be mindful when you're driving through those work zones, that those are workers that, and that's their work.
I think it should be every day, not just a week. It's, having been one of those workers and having employed people that are out there in the traffic, it's so important to slow down. We want everybody to go home in one piece and not make any calls from the hospital or worse. So please slow down. If not, in the case of highway, Indiana State Police are going to be really proud of me this year. Anybody else? Any other announcements at all? We don't have any. NIRPC meetings and events coming up. They're listed, but I will tell you that the full commission / executive board will meet next week on April 19th, 9 o'clock in this room. Prior to that, at 8 a.m., will be the Finance and Personnel Committee for NIRPC. T-ROC, Transportation Resource and Oversight Committee for Lake and Porter Counties will meet Tuesday, April 24th at 9 a.m. in the Dude Room. T-ROC for LaPorte will meet April 24th at 1:30 at City of LaPorte Parks Department. The Environmental Management Policy Committee will meet Thursday, May 3rd. And Pedal and Paddle, as you heard earlier, will meet again until June 7th. And that'll be at 11 a.m. in this room. The next Technical Planning Committee meeting will be May 8th at 9 o'clock in this room. Anything else good for the order? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you.